Imagine building this massive $10 million music empire, right? And you do it all from inside your sister's bedroom closet.
Yeah, just totally self-made.
Exactly. You create a brand that is so incredibly powerful, so viral, that you are literally immortalized as a character inside Fortnite.
Which is just crazy to think about.
Right. You have major label backing, you've got millions in the bank, the adoration of this huge global fan base, and then you throw every single piece of that away.
Every bit of it.
By allegedly committing just a horrific crime and going to these staggering, highly calculated lengths to destroy the evidence.
Right, the cover-up is just wild.
But then, after all that work, you just leave the victim's decomposing remains inside the front trunk of your own registered Tesla.
Just parked on the street.
Yeah, parked on a public residential street in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And you just leave it there until it literally gets a parking ticket and gets towed away.
It makes absolutely zero sense.
So today, we are looking at a logistical and psychological paradox that has just completely baffled investigators.
It really has. I mean, it's a narrative that totally fractures the moment you try to apply, any kind of conventional logic to it.
Right.
We are looking at this bizarre collision between extreme premeditated concealment and then just the most reckless, inexplicable exposure you could possibly imagine.
Exactly.
The timeline of this case is going to challenge everything you think you know about how high-profile crimes are covered up.
Well, welcome, fellow curious mind, to today's deep dive. I mean, our mission today is to just thoroughly examine a staggering, gruesome, and honestly legally complex true crime case.
It's definitely shaken the music and digital entertainment worlds to their absolute core.
Oh, absolutely. So we are unpacking the incredibly severe allegations against the 21-year-old indie pop star D4VD.
Whose legal name is David Anthony Burke.
Right, David Anthony Burke. And he is currently facing charges regarding the murder and dismemberment of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez.
And to give you, a really comprehensive understanding of how this situation escalated to this point and how the legal battle is shaping up right now, we've synthesized an enormous amount of highly technical source material.
Yeah, the stack of materials we are pulling from today is just massive. We are looking directly at official, unsealed court documents from the Los Angeles Superior Court.
The primary sources.
Right. And we are examining the harrowing autopsy reports finalized by the LA County Medical Examiner's Office. Plus, we've pulled in extensive on-the-ground news coverage.
Right, from investigative journalists at the LA Times and the Associated Press.
Yeah, and beyond that, we're analyzing transcripts and commentary from veteran criminal defense attorneys who have just been dissecting these preliminary hearings.
Alongside the industry fallout reports.
Exactly, detailing the immediate financial and cultural consequences in both the music industry and the gaming world.
Which means we are going to be walking you through the actual literal mechanics of this case. We aren't just going to tell you what the authorities claim happened. We're going to dive into how they extracted 40 terabytes of digital evidence.
Which is so much data.
It really is. And how forensic teams map cell tower pings to remote canyon roads, and how the legal concepts of malice and intent are actually debated in a courtroom setting.
Now, before we really step into the timeline, I do need to set a very firm boundary for our discussion today.
Of course.
Because the details of this case are inherently violent, they're deeply disturbing, and they are extremely emotionally charged.
Especially because they involve the alleged abuse and death of a child.
Right. So our absolute mandate in this deep dive is to impartially report on the content provided in these sources.
You're not here to take sides.
Exactly. We are not functioning as a jury, and we are not endorsing the specific viewpoints or moral judgments of either the prosecution or the defense.
And that impartiality is, it's a cornerstone of the legal system itself. In the eyes of the law, David Anthony Burke is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law.
So our role as guides through this material is simply to illuminate the evidence that has been entered into the public record.
Right, to decode the complex legal strategies being deployed by both legal teams.
Yeah, and basically just allow you to understand the architecture of this unprecedented trial.
So let's unpack this, because the core mystery that is going to keep you up at night isn't just the sheer brutality of the alleged crime.
No, it's the timeline.
Right.
It is the bizarre sequence of events where a multimillionaire pop star, allegedly uses fake names to order chainsaws and body bags,
Yeah.
purchases a massive industrial burn cage to incinerate evidence.
And then just simply abandons a car containing the victim on a street in Los Angeles.
Right. So to understand how we even arrived at that incomprehensible moment
Right.
and to understand the prosecution's theory of the motive, we have to start by looking at exactly what the suspect had to lose.
We have to examine the persona versus the reality.
Yes, and the absolute meteoric rise of D4VD.
If we look at the mechanics of the modern digital music industry, I mean, his trajectory is basically the blueprint for Gen Z stardom.
Oh, completely.
He bypassed the traditional gatekeepers entirely. He didn't spend years grinding in small clubs or, mailing demo takes to A&R executives.
Right, the sources trace his origins back to a remarkably isolated, really unassuming environment.
He was a homeschooled teenager in Houston, Texas.
Yeah, recording vocal tracks on a standard iPhone, utilizing incredibly basic digital audio workstations. I mean, literally sitting inside his sister's closet just to get better acoustics.
And his distribution method was entirely native to his generation.
He wasn't uploading music to Spotify hoping for some algorithmic miracle at first.
No, he was uploading his tracks as background music to his own Fortnite gaming montages on YouTube.
Right, because he realized that if he used copyrighted music, his gaming videos would get demonetized or taken down.
So he just made his own music to bypass the copyright strikes.
Which is so smart. But that intersection of gaming culture and indie pop is the critical engine of his wealth.
Oh, for sure. He tapped into a captive, highly engaged, and just massive demographic.
Players in Fortnite lobbies started hearing his tracks, searching for them, and ripping them to TikTok where they went totally viral.
He built an empire on the back of gaming micro-communities.
And it was so successful that Epic Games, the developer of Fortnite, eventually brought him into the game's actual ecosystem.
Which is a level of cultural penetration most artists can literally only dream of.
Yeah. Epic Games immortalized him with in-game cosmetics.
Right.
Players could spend real money converted into the game's currency, V-Bucks, to buy outfits and emotes associated with him.
They created jam packs featuring his music,
Yeah.
and his track, Locked and Loaded, was actually designated as an official Fortnite anthem.
The financial mechanics of that kind of integration are just staggering to think about.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a creator code or branded cosmetics in a game with hundreds of millions of active players, you are generating massive passive revenue streams.
You are monetizing a global audience 24 hours a day.
And obviously, the traditional music industry rushed in to capitalize on that digital momentum.
Of course they did. In 2022, Interscope Records, which is one of the biggest labels on the planet, signed him to a massive deal.
Right.
According to the preliminary hearing testimony from Louis Poimuru, who is Interscope's senior VP of finance, Burke received a $600,000 signing bonus right out of the gate.
Wow.
Yeah, and Poimuru testified that the label paid him at least $5.1 million between 2022 and his eventual arrest.
But the label money is really only a fraction of the total picture here.
Right.
When you factor in the streaming royalties from literally billions of plays, the touring revenue, and the highly lucrative corporate brand deals he secured.
Oh, yeah. He had deals with mainstream giants like Crocs, Bose Audio, AMC Theaters, Hollister.
Exactly. The financial reports indicate his total earnings between 2023 and 2025 hovered around $12 million.
By the age of 20, he had an estimated net worth of roughly $10 million.
So we have an individual who transitions from singing into a phone in a closet to managing a multinational, heavily monetized corporate brand in less than 3 years.
It's just wild. But the product he was selling, the actual aesthetic that generated this massive wealth, was incredibly dark, morbid, and honestly heavily fixated on violence.
And this is where we see the deliberate construction of a persona.
Right.
He created an alter ego for his music and his videos named Itami, which is the Japanese word for pain.
Yeah, and he publicly described this character as an agent of chaos.
The visual signature of this character was a blindfold, which Burke claimed in interviews was inspired by a specific Japanese manga.
Right, where a detective is investigating a series of gruesome murders, only to discover that his own doppelganger, his double, is the one committing them.
He also explicitly compared the Itami character to Tyler Durden.
The chaotic, destructive alter ego from Fight Club.
Exactly. And the visual and lyrical imagery he pushed out into the world was intense.
Very intense. There is a music video for his track One More Dance where the Atami character is literally depicted dragging a human body and loading it into the trunk of a car.
Which is, yeah.
And his massive breakout hit, a song called Romantic Homicide, which has amassed over 1 billion streams, features the explicit lyric, "I killed you and I didn't even regret it."
This raises a fascinating and highly contentious issue within the legal community, which is the use of artistic expression as evidence in a criminal trial.
Oh, definitely.
The Westminster Byline actually published a very thorough analysis of this exact debate, focusing on the First Amendment implications.
Right.
The core question they ask is, at what point does a creative work cease to be protected art and become circumstantial evidence of a crime, or even a confession?
I think we need to look at this through an analogy to really grasp the legal tightrope the prosecution is walking here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say an actor plays a highly skilled bank robber in a major Hollywood movie. The script dictates a very specific, unique method for disabling a complex vault alarm system. If that actor then quits acting, goes to a real bank, and uses that exact highly specific blueprint to rob the place, where is the line?
That's a great question.
Because writing a script isn't a crime. Singing a dark lyric isn't a crime. So how does a jury actually weigh this kind of circumstantial artistic evidence without violating freedom of speech?
That analogy perfectly isolates the tension.
Yeah.
Legally, the baseline is that lyrics and scripts alone are absolutely protected by the First Amendment.
Right.
In that Westminster Byline article, they quote a high school math teacher named Raynard Oliver, who effectively summarizes the public consensus.
What'd he say?
He said, songs are not evidence of a crime. It's just freedom of speech. You cannot be charged with a crime simply for having a morbid imagination.
But the prosecution in this case isn't just ignoring the romantic homicide lyrics or the music video with the body in the trunk. They're actively introducing it.
Right, they are.
So how do they get that past a judge?
Well, they rely on the concept of demonstrating a pattern of ideation and linking it to corroborating physical evidence.
Okay, break that down for me.
The legal hurdle here is Rule 403 versus Rule 404 in the rules of evidence.
Right.
Rule 404 generally says you can't use someone's past character or traits to prove they acted that way on a specific occasion.
So you can't say he sings about murder, therefore he is a murderer.
Exactly. That is highly prejudicial and usually completely inadmissible.
However, the prosecution will argue that the art is deeply intertwined with the motive and the methodology.
Precisely. They will argue that the Atami persona wasn't just a character, it was a window into his actual state of mind, revealing a morbid preoccupation with violence and concealment that he eventually acted out in reality.
Right, so if they can show that the 40 terabytes of digital data and the physical forensics from the garage perfectly mirror the scenarios he was obsessively writing about,
then the judge may rule that the probative value of the lyrics, meaning their usefulness in proving his specific intent or state of mind, outweighs the prejudicial impact.
it is deeply jarring to think about. I mean, millions of people, myself included, consume dark media constantly.
We all do.
We stream true crime, we listen to songs about violence, we play combat-heavy video games. It's a completely normalized part of our cultural entertainment.
Absolutely.
And we operate on this implicit social contract that the artist is playing a role for our amusement, that it is entirely fictional.
Right, there's a barrier there.
But when that barrier between a heavily curated million-dollar aesthetic and a grim physical reality evaporates, it forces you to totally reevaluate the media you are passively consuming.
It completely shatters the illusion. And in this case, the prosecution alleges that the wealth generated by that dark persona actually became the central motive for the crime itself.
Wow.
Because beneath the surface of the billion streams, the brand deals, and the Fortnite skins, there was a deeply disturbing, highly volatile relationship occurring in the shadows.
Let's transition into the timeline of that relationship, because understanding the digital trail left between David Burke and Celeste Rivas Hernandez is absolutely critical to understanding the legal peril he was already facing long before any allegations of murder arose.
It really is.
According to the court testimony provided by LAPD detective Corey Farrell, the two of them first met in August of 2022.
And the ages here are the most critical factor.
Yeah.
In August 2022, Burke was 17 years old. Celeste was 11.
11 years old. And the authorities allege that the sexual relationship began a bit later, specifically when she was 13 years old, and he had turned 18.
I want to pause on those ages and explain the specific legal statutes in California, because this isn't just a broad accusation of inappropriate behavior.
Right, it's very specific.
Under California Penal Code,
Mhm.
engaging in a sexual relationship with someone under the age of 14 when you're an adult constitutes continuous sexual abuse of a child.
Which is incredibly serious.
It is a severe, strict liability felony that carries mandatory, significant prison time.
And the prosecution claims they have an insurmountable mountain of evidence to prove this abuse occurred.
They do.
They didn't just find a few text messages. They extracted 40 terabytes of data from his devices and cloud accounts.
40 terabytes.
For context, 40 terabytes is an incomprehensible amount of text. It's millions of documents, photos, and chat logs.
It's basically his entire digital life.
And from that massive poll, they isolated approximately 9,000 text messages directly between Burke and Celeste.
We should take a moment to explain how modern digital forensics actually works, because people often assume that, deleting a text message or using a secure app makes the data disappear.
Right. Everyone thinks if they hit delete, it's gone.
But that is rarely the case, especially when law enforcement gets involved.
Yeah.
When the LAPD serves a search warrant on Apple or a F.A.F.O provider, they aren't just looking at the physical phone itself. They're pulling down entire iCloud backups, system logs, and metadata.
So even if a message is deleted from the screen of an iPhone, the data fragments often remain in the phone's flash memory until they are overwritten.
Or they live indefinitely on a server in some data center.
So they reconstructed this entire digital relationship, and the texts they recovered are incredibly graphic and deeply unsettling.
They really are.
They reveal discussions of past sexual encounters, meticulous planning for future liaisons, and even conversations about getting married.
Right.
In one exchange, he suggests they dip out the country and get married in Italy.
Which is just bizarre.
They even had a code name for their overarching plan to move in together permanently. They called it Operation Awesome.
And the manipulative nature of the messaging is glaring.
Yeah.
In June of 2024, he texted her, "I can't wait to move in together without the cops bitching baby. You can be with me everywhere."
Wow.
He is actively acknowledging the illegality of the situation, framing law enforcement not as protectors, but as an obstacle to their relationship.
But Operation Awesome was a complete fantasy masking a deeply traumatic reality.
It was.
The digital trail reveals conversations about her actually getting pregnant. The texts show her assuring him that the child was his, followed by allegations that he heavily and repeatedly pressured her to obtain an abortion.
The psychological toll this would take on a child is immense.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
There was one specific text message recovered from her phone that the prosecution has highlighted, and it is absolutely haunting. She wrote to him, "You made me kill my first child."
The contrast embedded in these digital exchanges is chilling. I mean, in her very final text message to him, which we will discuss shortly, she uses the phrase girly pop.
Right.
We are looking at a 14-year-old girl utilizing the vernacular of a middle schooler while simultaneously being forced to navigate adult extreme trauma like pregnancy, abortion, and his alleged infidelity.
Because according to the timeline reconstructed by investigators, it was his relationships with other women that finally pushed the situation to a breaking point.
Yes, the digital forensics indicate that the night before her death, a massive argument erupted over text message regarding his infidelity.
Celeste had apparently reached her limit.
The power dynamic briefly flipped, and she threatened to expose the entire relationship to the world.
She texted him, "I will end our career in her life."
Wow.
And she explicitly threatened to tell her father so many lies about him, clearly intending to burn his reputation to the ground.
Yeah, during the preliminary hearings, the defense attorney, Marilyn Bednarski, introduced a counter-narrative regarding the parents.
Right. This was a major point of contention.
She questioned LAPD Detective Farrell on the stand, and Farrell had to admit that Burke had actually attended church services with Celeste's family.
Yes.
Furthermore, Bednarski produced a notarized consent form signed by the parents, which legally permitted Celeste to travel internationally with Burke to London for a week in 2024.
That tactic by the defense is entirely designed to completely reframe the jury's perception of the relationship.
Right, but I have to push back on the legal viability of that argument. Does parental consent, even a notarized document, somehow mitigate or erase the continuous sexual abuse charges? If the parents say it's okay, does the law back off?
No, absolutely not. That is a widespread misconception. But legally, it holds zero weight.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The statutes regarding statutory rape and the sexual abuse of a minor under 14 are built on the concept of strict liability.
Meaning there are no exceptions.
Exactly. This means that a minor is legally, unequivocally incapable of providing consent to sexual activity. Full stop.
Right.
It doesn't matter how mature the child seems, and it certainly doesn't matter what legal documents the parents sign or notarize. You cannot sign a permission slip for a felony.
Wow.
Your parents' knowledge or complicity might expose them to legal jeopardy for child endangerment, but it does not absolve the adult perpetrator of the primary crime.
So if it has no legal bearing on dismissing the abuse charges, Bednarski is using it purely as a psychological tool against the prosecution's narrative. The prosecution wants to paint Burke as a predator operating in the shadows, deceiving the family. The defense is trying to muddy the waters to show that this wasn't a clandestine kidnapping, but a relationship that existed somewhat out in the open.
With the tacit approval of the adults in her life.
Right. They are trying to normalize the abnormal to soften the jury's perception of his intent.
It's an attempt to chip away at the concept of malice. But the prosecution counters this by escalating the murder charges significantly.
Yeah.
Because of the threats Celeste made to expose him, the prosecution has attached what are known in California as special circumstances to the primary first-degree murder charge.
And those special circumstances are what elevate this from a standard life sentence case to a potential death penalty or life without parole case.
Precisely.
If we look at the facts of 14-year-old threatening to expose a multimillionaire for statutory rape, I can see exactly which legal triggers this activates. The first has to be murder for financial gain.
Yes, though the prosecution is utilizing a slightly novel interpretation of that statute here.
Yeah. Right, because usually financial gain implies killing someone for an inheritance or a massive life insurance payout.
Exactly.
But here, they are arguing he killed her to protect the wealth he had already accumulated. He had a $10 million net worth.
Right.
If she goes public or goes to the police, the Interscope contract is voided. The Fortnite cosmetics are pulled. The brand deals with Crocs and Bows are instantly terminated. He loses every single dollar of future earning potential.
So the financial gain was preserving his empire.
Spot on. And the second special circumstance flows directly from that murder to silence a witness.
Because she wasn't just a disgruntled ex-girlfriend. She was the primary victim and the sole witness to a severe ongoing felony.
By eliminating her, he permanently silences the only person capable of testifying against him in a criminal trial regarding the abuse.
And the third special circumstance they added is lying in wait.
Okay, what does that mean legally?
This is crucial because it implies deep premeditation. It suggests he didn't just snap in the heat of a sudden argument.
Right.
It alleges that he deliberately lured her to a specific location, hiding his true intentions, preparing to execute a fatal attack the moment her guard was lowered.
Which brings us to the harrowing timeline of April 23, 2025.
Yes, the night of the alleged murder.
The prosecution alleges that those frantic texts, the fear of losing his empire, and the threat of severe prison time culminated in a fatal encounter at his rented mansion in the Hollywood Hills. Let's walk step by step through the chronology they've built.
At approximately 8:40 p.m. on the night of April 23, digital records show that Burke ordered an Uber to pick Celeste up from her residence in Lake Elsinore.
And for context, Lake Elsinore is roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours southeast of the Hollywood Hills, depending heavily on Southern California traffic.
And they are communicating while she is in transit. The digital forensic extraction recovered her final text message sent at exactly 10:10 p.m. as the Uber was approaching his address.
And she typed, "Girly pop, I'm almost there, open her door if you're home."
It's a message completely devoid of fear or suspicion. She believes she was arriving to resolve an argument, not walking into a trap.
And what the prosecution alleges happened next is detailed in the unsealed autopsy report conducted by the LA County Medical Examiner, Dr. Grant Poe.
It's very grim.
They allege that almost immediately upon her entry into the home, Burke attacked her with a sharp instrument.
The forensic pathology here is intense. Dr. Ho's report details multiple penetrating stab wounds.
Right.
The most severe was a 1.5-inch deep wound that completely perforated her liver, causing massive internal hemorrhaging. A second wound, measuring at least 2 inches deep, penetrated her rib cage.
During the preliminary hearing, the prosecutor asked Dr. Ho specifically about the timeline of mortality. How long would a human being survive injuries of that nature without immediate surgical intervention?
Dr. Ho testified that given the perforation of a major organ like the liver, blood loss would have been rapid and catastrophic.
Wow.
He estimated she would have bled to death in a matter of minutes, perhaps up to an hour at the absolute maximum, but she would have likely lost consciousness very quickly due to hypovolemic shock.
Now, let's look at the digital timeline, because 20 minutes after she sent that final message, at exactly 10:30 p.m., the forensic extraction shows Burke sending a series of text messages to Celeste's phone.
Right. He is asking her where she is. He is asking why she hasn't arrived yet.
And the data shows that all activity on Celeste's phone permanently ceased at that precise moment. It never connected to another cell tower. It never sent another packet of data.
I want to pause here and really drill down into a specific legal concept because the defense is heavily relying on the state of the body to cast doubt on Dr. Ho's conclusions.
Okay, let's get into it.
During cross-examination, Marilyn Bednarski forced the medical examiner to admit that because the body was in a state of extreme decomposition, having sat in the trunk of a car through the summer and weighing only 71 pounds upon discovery, he could not definitively rule out alternative scenarios.
Right.
She suggested that perhaps there was a physical struggle initiated by Celeste, or that she inflicted the wounds on herself in a dramatic gesture, or even that she suffered a massive drug overdose in the living room and he simply panicked.
The physiological reality of severe decomposition makes a forensic pathologist's job incredibly difficult, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Soft tissue degrades rapidly, making it nearly impossible to identify defensive wounds on the forearms or hands, which would typically indicate a struggle. It also obscures bruising.
Right.
Dr. Ho had to concede that from a purely scientific standpoint, the degradation of the tissue meant he couldn't definitively prove the exact mechanics of the altercation, even though the angle and depth of the stab wounds makes self-infliction highly improbable.
But let's apply some basic human logic to those defense theories. Let's assume, purely for the sake of argument, the most charitable scenario for the defense. A 14-year-old girl takes a massive accidental drug overdose in your living room, or in a moment of extreme distress, harms herself.
Okay.
What is the immediate instinctual response of an innocent person? You call 911, you scream for an ambulance, you try to administer first aid to clear your own name and save her life.
You definitely do.
You do not pull out your phone and send fake text messages to her device asking where she is.
And that massive logical gap is what the prosecution will fill with the legal doctrine of consciousness of guilt.
That's a crucial concept for listeners to understand.
It is. Consciousness of guilt asserts that a person's behavior after a crime has occurred can be powerful circumstantial evidence that they knew they had committed a wrongful act and that they possessed the requisite criminal intent.
So sending those texts at 10:30 p.m. is the digital equivalent of wiping down a gun.
Exactly. It is the active construction of a false alibi.
He knew the phone was in the pocket of a girl who was bleeding out on his floor, but he was creating a paper trail for the police to find later, hoping to prove she never made it inside.
Yes. And this leads us directly into the discussion of malice aforethought, which is the bedrock requirement for a first-degree murder conviction.
Right. Malice aforethought is often misunderstood as simply premeditation or planning, but it's deeper than that, isn't it?
It is.
Let me try to explain it with an analogy, and you tell me if I'm on the right track legally.
Go for it.
If I'm driving my car and I'm looking down at a text message, run a red light, and tragically hit a pedestrian, that is a horrific crime. It's vehicular manslaughter.
Right.
But it is not malice aforethought because I didn't set out with a conscious disregard for human life or an intent to kill.
Correct.
However, if I sit in my car across the street from someone's house, wait for them to walk outside, put the car in drive, and intentionally run them over, that is malice aforethought.
Yeah.
I harbored a specific intent to end a life.
That is a perfect illustration of express malice. But the law also recognizes implied malice.
Okay, what's implied malice?
Even if you don't explicitly plan to kill a specific person, if you intentionally commit an act whose natural consequences are dangerous to human life, and you do it with a conscious disregard for that danger, like firing a gun blindly into a crowded room, the law implies malice. In this case, the prosecution will argue that luring her to the home under the guise of lying in wait, the severity of the stab wounds to vital organs, and the immediate pivot to constructing a digital alibi rather than calling for medical help absolutely proves express malice aforethought.
Which brings us to the next phase of this nightmare. Because the lack of a panic response, the failure to dial 911, bridges us into a cover-up that is shockingly calm, methodical, and macabre.
It entirely destroys the narrative of a panicked teenager making a mistake.
We are looking at a level of psychological compartmentalization that most forensic psychologists would find deeply disturbing.
It's sociopathic.
Let's look at his itinerary for the very next morning, April 24th, 2025. Less than 12 hours after a 14-year-old girl is allegedly stabbed to death in his living room, What does David Burke do?
He goes to work.
He goes to work, he attends a scheduled promotional radio interview, and later that day, he is the guest of honor at a release party for his highly anticipated debut studio album. An album which, in a detail so grim you wouldn't believe it if it were in a movie, is titled Withered.
The cognitive dissonance required to execute that is staggering.
I just can't wrap my head around it.
To stand in a room full of industry executives, managers, and fans, smiling for photographs and discussing the creative vision behind your music, while a brutal crime scene is actively sitting inside your home. It speaks to a profound detachment from reality and empathy.
And while he was shaking hands at that release party, he was systematically utilizing his phone to order the tools necessary to destroy a human body.
It's chilling.
Let's break down the digital footprints of this cover-up, because he didn't just use his own Amazon Prime account. The court documents show he utilized specific aliases: Travion Davis and Victoria Mendez.
Now, you might wonder how law enforcement pierces the veil of an alias on a platform like Amazon or Postmates.
Right, because people think a fake name hides them completely.
It's a very common misconception that typing a fake name makes you a ghost.
Because how do you actually pay for it? How do you get it delivered?
Yes, exactly. Digital anonymity requires flawless operational security, which is incredibly difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
When the LAPD subpoenas Amazon for the records associated with the name Travion Davis, they receive a data packet containing the IP address of the device used to make the purchase.
And that IP address maps directly back to the router inside Burke's Hollywood Hills mansion.
Furthermore, they track the payment method. Did he use a credit card linked to his actual bank account? Even if he used a prepaid Visa gift card, investigators can track the serial number back to the specific convenience store where it was purchased and pull the CCTV footage of him buying it.
Wow, so he was basically cooked from the start.
And finally, the delivery node. The Postmates driver who delivered the items under the name Victoria Mendez used GPS to navigate to Burke's specific front porch. The digital web is incredibly dense.
And the items purchased by these aliases paint a horrifying picture of premeditation.
They do?
On April 24th, the day of the album release party, a shovel was ordered from Home Depot and delivered via Postmates. On May 1st, a week later, an order was placed on Amazon for 2 chainsaws.
2 chainsaws.
On May 5, additional Amazon orders were placed for a body bag, heavy-duty commercial laundry bags, and a large blue inflatable kiddie pool.
The forensic synthesis of those items leads us to the grim reality of what the prosecution alleges occurred inside the garage of that Hollywood Hills home.
Yeah.
The evidence strongly suggests that Burke placed Celeste's remains inside that blue inflatable pool to contain the biological material and then utilized those chainsaws to systematically dismember her.
I want to focus on how the crime scene investigators actually proved this, because it wasn't just a matter of finding a dirty chainsaw. The forensic science utilized in that garage is fascinating and undeniable.
It began with the concrete floor of the garage. Investigators observed areas that appeared to have been heavily scrubbed with cleaning agents.
Right.
When forensic technicians apply chemical reagents like luminol to a surface, it reacts with the iron present in hemoglobin, even if the visible blood has been entirely bleached or scrubbed away.
And the luminol luminesced, revealing a massive latent blood stain.
Yes.
And they were actually able to extract DNA from that scrubbed concrete.
Yes. Modern DNA sequencing is incredibly sensitive. They swabbed the porous concrete, extracted the degraded biological material, and confirmed through genetic testing that the blood belonged definitively to Celeste Rivas Hernandez.
There is a detail in the reports about the specific area of the garage where the blood was found that is just completely surreal.
Oh, the shelves.
Yeah, the latent bloodstain was located directly underneath a set of storage shelves, and those shelves were actively stocked with bottles of fake theatrical blood.
It's an almost cinematic level of irony. The tools of his fictional violent Itami persona, the fake blood used for music videos, were sitting inches away from the very real evidence of actual violence.
But the physical forensics went even deeper than the blood on the floor. When the medical examiner's office finally examined Celeste's cut remains months later, they found tiny microscopic fragments of blue plastic material physically embedded into the soft tissue and the cut surfaces of the bone.
And this is where chemical spectrometry comes into play.
How does that work?
Forensic chemists analyzed those blue plastic fragments and compared their chemical signature, the specific polymers and dyes used in their manufacturing, to the chemical signature of the blue inflatable kiddie pool purchased on Amazon under the Victoria Mendez alias.
And it was a precise match.
A perfect match.
This overwhelming physical evidence entirely demolishes the defense's suggestion of a tragic accidental overdose.
Completely.
Because if a 14-year-old girl accidentally overdoses in your home, you might panic. You might even make the terrible decision to try and hide the body out of fear. But you do not spend 2 weeks carefully acquiring chainsaws and an inflatable pool under fake names to meticulously dismember her.
Which is precisely why the district attorney added the specific felony charge of unlawful mutilation of human remains. In a circumstantial case, this charge carries immense narrative and legal weight. The calculated acquisition of these specific tools over a prolonged period demonstrates a cold, rational, forward-thinking mindset.
It points heavily to a desperate, calculated bid to hide not just the body, but the specific cause of death.
Exactly, making it impossible for a medical examiner to definitively find stab wounds on fully intact tissue.
And speaking of a calculated bid to hide the evidence, there is a specific detail regarding the mutilation that goes beyond simply fitting remains into a smaller space.
Yes.
It speaks to a surgical targeting of identity. The unsealed autopsy report noted that Celeste's left ring finger and her pinky finger had been entirely amputated.
They were missing from the recovered remains and have never been found.
Why take the time to sever those two specific fingers?
The investigative reports indicate that Celeste had a very specific identifying mark on her hand. She had a red ink tattoo of the name David on one of those missing fingers.
So, amidst the horror of the dismemberment, he possessed the presence of mind to specifically target and remove the one piece of physical flesh that bore his name.
Actively severing the most obvious physical link between victim and suspect.
It is incredibly cold and highly rational. But this is exactly where we hit the wall.
Right.
This is where the dark mathematical logic of the cover-up completely falls apart, bringing us to the central paradox of this entire deep dive.
The timeline mystery. The multi-million-dollar question.
Right. After going to such horrific, calculated lengths to destroy the evidence, ordering the chainsaws, chemically scrubbing the garage, cutting off identifying tattoos, constructing digital alibis, why on earth did he place her dismembered remains into the front trunk of his own easily identifiable registered Tesla, and then just abandon the car on a public street in Los Angeles for the parking enforcement to find?
It makes absolutely zero logical sense.
To unravel this, we have to meticulously track his movements between May and September.
Let's look at the digital tracking of that vehicle. Modern vehicles, particularly Teslas, are essentially rolling computers.
Right. They track everything.
They're constantly pinging cell towers and connecting to GPS satellites. By subpoenaing those data logs, investigators determined that Burke didn't just leave the car parked for months.
He actively drove that specific Tesla, with the remains presumably inside the front trunk, on several long-distance trips.
The cell tower data places the vehicle in Santa Barbara County on 3 separate occasions. Once in late April, again on May 8, and a final time on May 31st.
And for listeners unfamiliar with the geography, Santa Barbara is roughly a 2 to 2.5 hour drive north of Los Angeles.
Yes.
As you leave the dense urban sprawl of LA, the landscape changes dramatically. You enter the Santa Ynez Mountains, areas characterized by remote canyons, heavy brush, winding state routes, and vast tracts of unpopulated national forest.
It is the exact type of terrain someone might seek out if they were looking for a remote location to discreetly dispose of evidence.
And we know definitively that he was actively scouting these areas because the digital footprint was corroborated by physical evidence found months later.
Right.
On January 17th, 2026, a Caltrans worker who was simply doing routine roadside maintenance and trash pickup along State Route 154, which is a winding mountain pass near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County, found Celeste's U.S. passport card discarded in the dirt near the highway.
That discovery proves he was on that specific remote road, actively disposing of items belonging to the victim.
But despite taking 3 separate trips to these isolated mountain passes, he never dumped the body.
No, he didn't.
Every single time, the cell tower data shows the Tesla returning to the Hollywood Hills mansion with its gruesome cargo still inside.
Why? He had a shovel. He was surrounded by thousands of acres of empty forest. Why bring the evidence back to the most densely populated city in this state?
To understand that hesitation, we have to look at the next purchase he made, which occurred on July 7, 2025.
Over 2 months after the alleged murder, Burke logs back onto Amazon and purchases a large burn cage.
For those who haven't seen one, a burn cage is essentially a heavy-duty industrial metal incinerator.
Right.
It's designed with cross-ventilation to contain extremely hot, roaring fires, typically used for burning massive amounts of yard waste or debris into fine ash.
The acquisition of an incinerator in July suggests a terrifying realization on his part.
Which was?
He likely realized that simply burying a dismembered body in a shallow grave in Santa Barbara wasn't secure enough.
Yeah.
Animals could dig it up, hikers could find it.
He needed to completely eradicate the biological material. He needed to turn it to ash. Which brings us to a really compelling theory regarding why he never used that burn cage.
Right.
And this theory is heavily discussed by people following the case because look at how sick he really is for what he did. But everyone is wondering, why do everything he did and then not try to get rid of the body?
It's the biggest missing piece of the puzzle.
My theory, well, and the theory of a lot of CAL FIRE consultants reviewing the timeline, is that he was forced to wait to try and burn the body because of how dry it was.
The wildfires.
Exactly. Think about the geography in the calendar. It is July and August in the San Ynez Mountains. You were operating in the absolute peak of California's wildfire season.
The environmental conditions are a crucial factor here. The brush in those canyons during July is essentially highly combustible tinder.
Right. He definitely would have been busted then, so he was trying to wait until he could, but then Tesla got towed.
Let's apply the analogy of a skydiver. Imagine a skydiver who has packed the perfect, state-of-the-art parachute. He has the exact mechanism he needs to survive the jump.
Okay.
But as he looks out the door of the plane, he realizes he is flying directly over an active erupting volcano. The tool he has is perfect, but the environment makes deploying it immediate suicide.
That is exactly what happened with the burn cage. Burke possessed the perfect mechanism to destroy the evidence, but if he drives a Tesla out into the dry, remote canyons of Santa Barbara in the middle of July and fires up a massive, blazing industrial incinerator reaching hundreds of degrees, the environment will betray him.
The risk of detection would be absolute. The San Ynez Mountains are heavily monitored during fire season. CAL FIRE utilizes remote thermal imaging cameras, physical fire watch towers, and constant aerial patrols.
Right. They see everything.
The moment a column of thick black smoke rises from a canyon or the intense heat signature of an incinerator is detected, fire crews and law enforcement would swarm the location within minutes. He couldn't burn the body without guaranteed immediate discovery.
So the analysts theorize he was forced into a holding pattern. He had the burn cage, but he was trapped by the California summer.
Yes.
He was likely waiting for the weather to change, perhaps hoping to wait until the winter rains arrived in November or December, when the brush would be wet and the fire risk mitigated, allowing him to safely incinerate the evidence.
It's an incredibly sound deduction based on the logistical realities of the region. He was waiting for a window of opportunity that the environment was denying him.
But he couldn't wait forever because he was running out of time on a completely different front. What was looming on his calendar in August of 2025?
His career. The massive, multi-million-dollar Withered World Tour.
Right.
He was contractually obligated to perform a grueling schedule of concerts across North America and Europe. He could not remain at the Hollywood Hills mansion indefinitely, standing guard over a Tesla containing a decomposing body.
He had to leave the state to maintain the facade of his pop star life and fulfill his tour obligations.
The pressure of the impending tour triggered complete logistical collapse. Surveillance video from the neighborhood captures him driving the Tesla for the final time on July 29.
And he parks it on Bluebird Avenue, a very narrow, crowded residential street located right around the corner from his rented mansion.
Right.
And in a final, desperate bid to conceal the reality of what was inside the front trunk, what does he do?
Crime scene technicians documented the interior of the vehicle upon its recovery. They found 11 distinct, highly fragrant auto air fresheners scattered throughout the cabin and the trunk area.
11 air fresheners.
A frantic attempt to mask the overwhelming odor of advanced decomposition.
It is an act of such staggering desperation and delusion. He builds this elaborate high-tech operation to hide his crime using aliases, IP routing, digital alibis, chainsaws, and incinerators, only to abandon the evidence in his own registered car on a public street and fly to Minneapolis to play a concert.
It's unbelievable.
Did he truly believe the fame and the air fresheners made him invisible? Or was the psychological weight of managing a brutal cover-up while simultaneously launching a global music empire simply too much for his operational security to handle?
It is the definition of hubris colliding with incompetence. He compartmentalized the crime so severely that he convinced himself he could just walk away from it.
Right.
But the mundane reality of municipal parking enforcement is what finally brought his empire crashing down.
The timeline of the discovery is a testament to the slow, inevitable grinding of the bureaucratic machine.
Right.
On August 27, almost a month after he parked it, an LAPD parking enforcement officer noticed the Tesla hadn't moved and marked the tires with chalk.
Standard procedure.
On September 3, the vehicle was officially issued a citation for violating Los Angeles' 72-hour continuous parking ordinance. Finally, on September 5, a tow truck arrived, hooked up the Tesla, and impounded it to a crowded tow yard in Hollywood.
And it sat in the blistering September heat for 3 more days.
Wow.
On September 8, 2025, the ambient temperature inside that metal trunk overwhelmed the 11 air fresheners. A tow yard worker, investigating a horrific smell, managed to open the front trunk.
And the LAPD was immediately dispatched.
The remains inside were so severely degraded that they weighed only 71 pounds and were completely unrecognizable, requiring extensive DNA testing to confirm it was Celeste.
The moment the trunk opened, the entire trajectory of the case shifted, leading to a massive cultural fallout and a high-stakes legal battle that is currently dominating the courts.
Oh, completely.
But it is fascinating to note how the LAPD initially handled the explosive nature of this discovery. They were incredibly secretive, operating with a level of lockdown rarely seen even in high-profile homicides.
The secrecy was really unprecedented. In a highly unusual legal maneuver, LAPD detectives actually petitioned a judge, Craig Richmond, to issue a strict court-ordered security hold on the medical examiner's autopsy file.
Right.
This legal injunction actively prevented the chief medical examiner, Dr. F.A.F.O, from releasing any details to the public. They couldn't confirm the identity, the cause of death, or even officially classify it as a homicide for months.
Which caused significant friction between the departments. Dr. Ugpo actually went on the record to publicly criticize the LAPD's use of these security holds, arguing that suppressing autopsy information rarely aids in an investigation and degrades public transparency.
Which is a valid point.
Why were the police so determined to keep this quiet?
Well, LAPD Detective Joshua Byers laid out their reasoning in court. He argued that if the specific gruesome details like the precise nature of the stab wounds or the missing tattooed fingers were leaked to the press, it would severely compromise their ability to interrogate potential suspects or verify the testimony of witnesses.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, they were dealing with a highly mobile, incredibly wealthy suspect who possessed the financial means to flee the country instantly.
Right, he could just charter a jet.
Exactly. They needed to quietly build their 40-terabyte digital case and secure their arrest warrants before Burke realized the net was closing around him.
And when they finally did execute those warrants and arrest him in April of 2026, the situation somehow became even darker.
It did.
Following the seizure of his devices upon arrest, prosecutors announced an additional, deeply disturbing discovery. They found a significant amount of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, stored on his iCloud account.
From a prosecutorial standpoint, the discovery of the CSAM is a devastating blow to any defense attempt to portray Burke as a misunderstood youth who made a tragic mistake in the heat of passion.
It totally destroys that narrative.
It legally bolsters the narrative of a deeply ingrained predatory behavioral pattern. It establishes a baseline of deviance that makes the leap to premeditated murder far more credible to a jury.
Which brings us to the current legal chess match happening in the courtroom. We discussed the defense attorney, Marilyn Bednarski, and her focus on the limitations of the decomposed autopsy.
Right.
But there was another specific tactic she deployed during the preliminary hearings that caused absolute outrage in the courtroom.
You are referring to her prolonged cross-examination regarding Celeste's digital footprint.
Yes. Bednarski spent a significant portion of the hearing methodically reading Celeste's final angry text messages into the official court record.
Yeah, that was tough to watch.
She highlighted the messages where the 14-year-old used profanity, where she aggressively threatened to end his career, and where she allegedly made threats to physically mutilate him.
And the lead prosecutor, Beth Silverman, was so incensed by this tactic that she actively objected, standing up in court to express absolute disgust.
Right, stating on the record that the defense was deliberately attempting to dirty up a deceased 14-year-old murder victim.
It is a tactic that is profoundly uncomfortable to witness, and it carries a massive risk of backfiring spectacularly. Juries are composed of human beings with empathy.
Yeah, they usually don't like that.
They generally have a visceral, highly negative reaction to defense attorneys who appear to be victim-blaming, particularly when the victim is a child who was allegedly suffering ongoing abuse.
So why do it? Why risk alienating the jury so severely?
Because from a cold, purely strategic legal standpoint, Bednarski is executing her constitutional duty.
What do you mean?
She is operating in a circumstantial case where there is no murder weapon, no eyewitness to the stabbing, and a body too decomposed to clearly show the mechanics of the attack. Her mandate is to introduce reasonable doubt wherever she can find a crack in the prosecution's narrative.
So by painting Celeste as erratic, aggressive, or capable of initiating extreme violence, she is attempting to chip away at the malice aforethought requirement.
Exactly. She is trying to plant the seed that perhaps a chaotic struggle occurred, lowering the charge from first-degree murder to manslaughter, or creating enough confusion to hang the jury.
It is distasteful, but in a seemingly unwinnable case, it is often the only tool left in the defense playbook.
Right. But the prosecution, spearheaded by Beth Silverman, seems incredibly confident in their ability to overcome those defense tactics.
Yeah, they may not have the bloody knife, but they have an overwhelming mosaic of circumstantial evidence.
They have the 40 terabytes of data.
They have the 9,000 texts proving the financial and legal motive to silence her.
They have the IP-tracked Amazon receipts for the chainsaws, the aliases, the DNA embedded in the scrubbed garage floor, and the blue plastic fragments linking the remains to the purchases.
And legal analysts are quick to point out that circumstantial evidence can be just as powerful, if not more so, than direct evidence.
Oh, absolutely. Criminal defense attorney Jamal Kersey, who breaks down high-profile trials on YouTube, provided a brilliant comparative analysis.
What did he compare it to?
He referenced the Larry Millette case down in San Diego. In that trial, prosecutors secured a first-degree murder conviction without a body, without a murder weapon, and without a crime scene, relying entirely on the defendant's digital footprint and circumstantial behavior.
Wow.
In the Burke case, the prosecution has the body, they have the physical crime scene in the garage, and they have a digital trail of consciousness of guilt that is almost unprecedented in its detail.
And while the legal battle grinds slowly toward a trial, the fallout outside the courtroom has been swift and absolute.
It's been total erasure.
The digital empire that Burke built, the very empire the prosecution alleges he killed to protect, has been systematically dismantled by the industry.
The corporate erasure happened incredibly rapidly once the grand jury subpoenas began circulating and the arrest became public.
Right. Epic Games, the company that had championed his rise, moved immediately to scrub him from Fortnite, instituting a policy offering immediate self-service refunds to any player who had purchased his in-game cosmetics.
The major labels moved just as fast. During the hearings, Interscope Records executives testified that they had officially dropped him from their roster back in December of 2025, months before his actual arrest.
They were likely panicking when law enforcement began serving warrants on the label's financial records.
Yeah, you don't want to be attached to that. Major streaming platforms followed suit, and high-profile artists like Kali Uchis and Laffy quietly had their collaborative tracks with him removed from streaming services.
The music world is actively trying to pretend he never existed.
Though, in a final, twisted footnote to this entire saga, the internet proved impossible to completely scrub.
Right, the leak.
In September of 2025, just as the Tesla was being impounded, an unreleased demo track of his leaked online. The title of the track was Celeste.
It featured the lyrics, "Afraid you'll only love me when undressed, but you look so damn gorgeous in that dress."
It serves as a haunting, permanent reminder of the blurry, dangerous line between his carefully curated art and the alleged brutal reality of his actions.
It truly is. We are looking at the tragic, violent, and utterly bewildering end of a young life. A 14-year-old girl, allegedly murdered and discarded by a rising star who existed in such a profound bubble of delusion that he believed his fame, his money, and his dark internet persona could shield him from the consequences of unspeakable acts.
It's just a tragic reality.
He genuinely thought he could order chainsaws on Amazon under a fake name, dismember a human being, abandon the evidence on a city street, and just catch a flight to go play a pop concert.
It is a case that forces a deeply uncomfortable re-examination of the power dynamics of extreme wealth, the vulnerability of youth in the digital age, and the dangerous psychological territory where the fiction we consume bleeds into the reality we inhabit.
But as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final, deeply provocative thread to pull out on your own.
And this is a big one.
It is a detail that hasn't dominated the major headlines, but it sits right in the middle of those unsealed court documents, and it raises terrifying questions about the ecosystem that surrounded this pop star.
It brings us back to the adults in the room.
Exactly. Think back to those text messages outlining Operation Awesome, the grand plan for Celeste to secretly move into his Hollywood mansion.
Right.
In those texts, D4D explicitly stated that he was going to use his own bodyguard to help her move her belongings.
Furthermore, in the early days of the investigation, before the arrest, captains from the LAPD's Robbery-Homicide Division went on the record stating they heavily suspected that multiple individuals might have been involved in the logistics of disposing of the body and the vehicle.
And the grand jury subpoenas cast a very wide net. A senior record label executive, Burke's personal manager, and multiple friends from his inner circle, including a prominent Twitch streamer named Neo Langston, who was actually arrested by a fugitive task force for failing to appear before the grand jury, were all legally compelled to testify.
It leaves you with a chilling, unresolved question to ponder. We know he ordered the tools. We know the forensics placed the body in the garage and the car.
But in a rented mansion bustling with managers, producers, bodyguards, label reps, and friends, how many adults in David Burke's inner circle saw the red flags?
How many of them knew about the 14-year-old girl spending time in the house?
Did any of them see the blue kiddie pool in the garage? Did any of them smell the air fresheners in the Tesla?
And the darkest question of all, how many adults saw the warning signs, or perhaps even the evidence itself, and actively chose to look the other way, to stay quiet in order to protect their million-dollar golden goose?
It highlights the deeply uncomfortable reality of the entourage effect in the entertainment industry. When there are millions of dollars, lucrative contracts, and massive careers dependent on the success of one individual, moral accountability is almost always the very first casualty.
It really is.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the media you consume. Pay attention to the mechanics of the digital footprints we all leave behind, and always keep questioning the realities hiding behind the heavily produced personas we are taught to idolize. Because sometimes when the facade cracks, you find out the truth is far darker than the fiction. We'll see you next time.